What's good, folks? This is SilentMode, maker, artist, and LEGO enthusiast. This is a project that I came up with back in 2021, as you can see in the sketch there. And it's for what I call an element measuring tape. I know it says LEGO there, but it's an element measuring tape officially. And the idea for this came when I came across an artifact at my studio. I'm not going to say what it is. I want to keep it as a surprise, and also because I may not actually do anything with it. But I needed a way of measuring how many Lego elements would fit inside it. And I could do the usual thing of building a web solution that calculates it, or just using a straight up calculator. But I thought, why not use my skills and create something that I can use for other projects as well? And so I came up with the idea of a tape measure. Haven't seen anything like this anywhere else. It may get stolen at some point, as many an idea does in this Lego space, but you've seen it here first at least. So I've designed this in Illustrator, and the idea is to have one side measure the number of plates wide and the other side measure the number of plates tall. And this would be a convenient aid for determining how many elements in either direction to use to try and recreate things. Fortunately, I remembered most of the measurements as well as the tolerances or clearances. So it was fairly easy to come up with this design. And I decided to restrict myself to using just a single sheet of A4 paper. Didn't want to be too ambitious and make it too long to begin with. And as you can see, I've left a black tab there that's going to serve as a piece to keep the tape from folding inside the body. Here you can see the first strip that I cut out manually just to check that everything works. It folds over quite nicely, and here you can see me cutting the rest of them out rather roughly using this old school guillotine. You may remember I used this in my passport project. Works really well. Haven't cut it very cleanly with the guillotine, so I'm having to go over it with some scissors to get it looking as neat as possible. Actually doesn't matter too much at this point because we will do some trimming later on. And you may see that I've left a tab on one end. Initially that was to help with aligning the strips when I eventually stick them together. You'll see that the strips fold over quite nicely. After the obligatory throwdown for the YouTube video, I will fold these over using a metal ruler, and I'm surprised at how well I've managed to do this. Usually I would mess it up and have to fold it over again, but I managed to get it right the first time. Haven't had to do this in quite a while actually. But anyway, there we go. And now we have all four pieces. And we're going to use some double-sided tape to hold both pieces together. Now, double-sided tape is something I didn't really come into until much later in life. I grew up watching Blue Peter on TV and all the other art-based shows, arts and crafts-based shows such as Art Attack, Bitzer. Those are the ones I can remember. And double-sided tape back in the day was really expensive and quite hard to come by. I certainly couldn't afford it with the pocket money I was earning. Fortunately, these days it's a lot more commonplace, and it's quite inexpensive as well. You can get it from any good place that sells stationery, and there's quite a few of those around. But it doesn't take very much double-sided tape to hold these halves together. I decided to go with small bits as opposed to trying to cut a really long strip and perhaps making a mess of it. I was under a self-imposed time constraint, so I didn't want to mess anything up trying to do this. But it works really well. It's I'd say it's semi-permanent, so you can go back and correct it if you like, but it does a good job of holding the two halves of paper in place. And in general, I would use double-sided tape when I want a connection that's not quite as strong as super glue, but strong enough to hold something in place. I think it's good for mounting things to walls or wooden surfaces. I don't use it very often, but it's useful to have in such a case. Now, as I said, I came up with this idea in late 2021, and it's taken this long for me to be brave enough to attempt something like this because I had no idea how to go about it. Here you can see I made an error in judgment with these tabs. I didn't take into account the thickness of the paper. So ultimately I ended up cutting this off and just attaching them the old-fashioned way, trying to get it as neat as possible. There's a small overlap, I suppose. There's a small extension because the line isn't going to be the same width, but I think it's negligible. As I said, I had no idea how to create the actual tape because I don't have access to all that good stuff, the industrial machines, the fancy printing techniques, printers, etc. Nothing to make the tape measure look like an actual tape measure. So in the end, I just decided to improvise with what I have, which I think is probably the best way to go about things. And initially I thought about using plastic wrap, you know, the old school kind, the adhesive kind that you use to laminate book covers. But I had this wide roll of sticky tape. And initially I had thought about just doing it in one continuous length, but I thought it was manageable with the lack of space that I have to do it in bits. I managed to get the first two strips stuck together successfully, but you'll see there I'm fighting with the cutting mat and still wanting to get it as smooth and as clean as possible. Fortunately, I didn't make any glaring errors, although you will see a few creases and things as we go along. Very grateful that I didn't mess up any of the printing. And I suppose if I had the time and I had the skills, I would invent some kind of machine to where it feeds in the tape, it feeds in the strips, and it would very cleanly and accurately apply both together to get a nice long continuous and smooth strip resembling a measuring tape. But I always would advise breaking things down into small parts, so you'll see that I use a small bit of tape to attach the different strips and then using a longer bit of tape to cover everything. Now fortunately there I didn't destroy any of the printing. If I had, I probably would have started over with a new printout. But fortunately it worked out. I was able to reposition the tape and it's nice and smooth, as you can see. There are some folds, which is natural for a first time, but you'll see there it goes nice and smoothly through my fingers. And it actually does resemble a measuring tape in a sense. It's not made of metal, but that doesn't matter right now. You'll see me cleaning up some of the edges, and I should have used a scalpel with a fresh blade, but I was kind of lazy. And I did separate some of the edges, so I'm just going over them with some tape just to make it look a little bit neater now. And I just cut off some excess tape, just making sure that everything is intact. You'll see there, that's what I have at the moment. Still glides nicely through my hands. And we are getting ready to curl it so it fits more easily inside the tape measuring body. I'm repurposing this large-scale print of a LEGO paint roller. I like having secondary uses for these things just lying around. And this hasn't actually been doing anything, it's just literally just sat there waiting for a purpose. But I'm using this to curl the measuring tape so it fits more easily inside of the tape measuring body. Or to break it in, basically. I think that's the correct term for it. And it's done a really good job. It's curled up nicely. And now here you'll see the tape measuring body that I designed. It's got mode instead of a certain brand's name on the top. I designed this to make it look like a round plate, and I designed this so it doesn't use support material, which I'm quite proud of. I'm not one of those people who's against support material. I think it's necessary sometimes, but it is a challenge, as a fellow maker once said, to design things that don't use support material. Now I had the idea of applying a tab to the black tab on the measuring tape. I'm using some Gorilla Glue, which by the way isn't the same as super glue. It's a completely different product. And I'm going to attach this 3D printed tab to the end, and this will prevent the tape from sinking into the body when I roll it up again. I was concerned at this point that I'd incorrectly designed this tab. I was cognizant of the fact it had to be tight enough to be held in place, but not so loose that it wouldn't stick to the tape. And I think I got it just about right, so I got lucky, especially considering I was using a particularly strong glue. And it held in place very nicely. Now here I'm trying to thread the tape into the body. The skateboard bearing that I used isn't 100% necessary, but it does help with the smooth motion when winding the tape. And here I realized that I had to make this end tab a lot longer because I wanted the 300 ends of the measuring tape to stick out once the unwinding had reached its limits. For some reason I decided it was best to use the Gorilla Glue to stick this piece of paper to the end. In hindsight, sticky tape would have been a lot quicker and probably more sensible. You didn't see that. But I wasn't thinking, I was just flying by the seat of my pants, and fortunately it worked quite well. It just took a while to cure, that's all. But this extra tab, as I said, will help to expose all of the tape when it's unwound, while keeping it attached to the measuring tape body. And this is how the end is attached to the top of the tape measure body. So the tape will sit in between the place where the bearing is held and the top or the lid. I had to put the tape back in because it was upside down. But that is how the tape is held in place, and it will fit, the top will fit inside of the bearing. And this is the first time I am testing how well it winds and unwinds, and I'm actually surprised at this point of how smooth it is, and that's thanks to the bearing. Again, it isn't entirely necessary, but it helps with the smooth motion. It also adds a tiny bit of weight to the measuring tape. And here I'm also testing that the tab prevents the tape from folding into the body, and I can easily pull the tape out, which is really nice as well, and I can wind it back again. By the way, there's a tendency for makers to make things in red for some reason. I consciously decided not to go with red. Instead, I used an orange PLA filament that actually it actually glows in the dark, funnily enough. So it may be useful to help find this in low light conditions or in the dark. Not sure why that would be useful, but there it went. And yes, I'm happy with how this works. I can wind the tape up again. I can pull it out. There may be some more work to do with how the lid or the top sits on the base. But here I'm using the tape measure. I'm demonstrating how I'd use it in the real world by measuring some random items. This is a base plate from Wilco, which is more or less the same dimension as a regular LEGO base plate, maybe different size. I'm using the plate's tall feature to measure this advent calendar model from a few years ago. Seems to work quite well. And here is a 3D model that I designed, purely a self-promotion to see how well it measures. I designed this with LEGO dimensions in mind, so the measurements are quite accurate. And yeah, again, I am very pleased with how this turned out. I think as is going to be a really useful tool, and there's room for improvement also. That's who I am right there, and let's not forget it. So yeah, I'm really proud of this, and let me know what you think about it. Have you seen anything like this before? Is this something that you would like to see as an official product? Let me know in the comments section. And in the meantime, this has been SilentMode, maker, artist, and LEGO enthusiast, encouraging you all to do your thing.